and branding. My name is Tina Lynn, and I'm the student career advisor here at SPH. And our team is here to support you as you consider your field work, your capstone, and the next steps after graduation, and hoping that you're engaging as early as possible. And we'll be recording the informational part of today's event so that in case you drop off the Zoom, need to rejoin or want to look back at it, it's available to you in the Handshake resources. And today's agenda, we'll be doing in splitting it up in three parts. First part being a presentation of some ideas and thoughts to consider along with some advice, as well as looking at your career journal, and really kind of taking a deeper dive in the most important part, which is kind of the pair and share and the application of this information in practicing and discussing scenarios. And we'll close out that time together in debriefing that, as well as share additional resources. And so kind of the questions that have been coming in from students about this event and about this topic, and a lot of great questions that we hope that we'll address throughout the presentation as well as at the end. And some of the things that have been coming up are kind of like, what are the hardest parts of networking and branding? And what are some common pitfalls to avoid? Or how to do this with an online degree to network effectively for career advancement, and just a starting place. Other questions talk about setting yourself apart and being authentic and strategic, and all the elements that you want to include and showcase. And so we'll kind of take some time to address this both during and at the end. But just to start off, in terms of like the hardest part of networking, I would say that there's different phases and parts to networking, where each phase may have its challenge. And really kind of like looking at these different phases from in three phases with different parts, right? So the first phase is kind of the self-reflection. And so on one end, looking at yourself, and on the other end, looking at the marketplace, right? So taking time to think through what's important for you, but also to see what's out there. Phase two, kind of like thinking about outreach, connecting and with people, and engaging with people, kind of like those starting conversations, right? And then phase three is sort of like that kind of like master level in terms of like following up with people and really cultivating these relationships so that you're able to leverage them as these professional colleagues become your advocates and your champions. I would say some things to avoid are kind of like there has been like an explicit approach, right? Like, kind of your goal might be, I need a job. And like for a lot of our international students, it might be, I need a job that's going to give me an H-1B visa. But leading off with that is what I would say would be something to avoid. Instead, to approach it with an implicit sort of attitude, where it's more displaying your curiosity around tell me about yourself, like what got you interested in this career, this section of public health. Like, help me get to know more about the company that you work for, or the research that you're doing. And like this implicit approach will get you to your explicit goal, but the way that you get there and how you get there, and the tone in which you step into this is different. And for like those that are just purely online students, or even just in this virtual environment, and certainly through our workshops, we have found that there is opportunity to connect with people meaningfully in the virtual environment. It just takes more intentionality, right? So to be intentional about capitalizing on this opportune moment, like really investing yourself in it and knowing how to kind of glean from it the most that you can. And sort of like, well, where to start? Any place, just pick a spot. any starting point is a good starting point. And so we're going to kind of like get a feel of where people feel where they're at in terms of which phase do you find challenging when you're engaging in networking. Um, and we'll also look at kind of like uh, what phase you're in and what challenges you have with networking. So Caroline is going to open the poll and launch the poll and kind of like we'll get started on this self-reflection piece. We'll just give a minute or two for folks to kind of think about these Zoom poll questions.
Everyone should be able to see, okay, before responding.
Great. You know, I'll say like each of these phases, kind of like that first phase in self-reflection, kind of like, do you know what you want? Do you know who you are? Right. And then industry research, like, you know, what are you interested out there? What are those topics? What are those themes? And do you have names of companies or names of like, I'll call it a name or like a thematic area in public health that you're looking to address, right? And kind of that outreach place is like that starting place of just kind of like, oh, I don't know what to say to someone when I meet them for the first time, or I don't know how to write an outreach email. That part is hard for me. Okay, so you've done the outreach, but there you're like, oh boy, I'm gonna have this informational conversation and this first time engagement. Like, is that difficult? Or is it kind of like, all right, I've just had this conversation, now what? And but like as you've been doing it, it's like, well, I've talked and emailed to this person a couple of times. Like, now what? What's next? Right? On the cultivation part. And sort of like thinking through, well, what phase do you find challenging? And then kind of thinking about, well, which phase do you have, which phases maybe have you been a part of or engaged in? And kind of like we're already engaging in the self-reflection piece of it to assess, you know, where are we at so that we can kind of have an idea of where we might be going next. So there's maybe a third that we're still waiting on some participants. Okay, great. We're getting there. And I think it'll be really interesting to kind of see these the answers from your peers as well, because I think another thing about um, this topic around networking or branding, I feel like those are very clinical words, right? It's very sterile, but actually all it is kind of like, how do we be a friend and be a colleague to other public health professionals and just be that good person that shows up in these spaces and places and starts a conversation and gets around an issue and continues doing so. So I think like it's kind of like riding a bike. Who reads a manual about riding a bike? You just get on there and start doing it. And I think like networking is like that. And so kind of like that's just additional food for thought. We'll just give it another 10 seconds. We have like a couple more people that haven't replied. So just give you another minute or two. Oh, well, actually less than a minute, just 20 seconds. I think some of you are being so thoughtful about some of this, which is great. Okay. So yeah, let's see what you all have said about this. And for this first question, I don't know if people see kind of like the answers. Is that showing up on the screen, Carolini? The results?
To me, yes. If someone can please confirm, you can also. Okay, Eugene said they are able to. Thank you, Eugene.
Great, great, great. So like looking at kind of where you find it challenging, the majority have said the outreach piece. Um, some have said the follow-up and some have said the cultivation, right? So it's interesting, like kind of like that, how to get started. But and some also have shared about like the industry research, kind of like how to do that, how to do that research. And for the phases where people are in, the majority is kind of trying to get that industry research going. Less are in the engagement and follow-up and cultivation page. So phases. So it's more like in this early part of networking. And in terms of like the challenge areas, there seems like there's like a lot of anxiety out there and just like fears of what might happen. And the biggest challenge is really just how do you spend the time in doing this? Um, uh, Thankfully, there's been no like negative experiences from this, but it's just a matter of seems like it's a matter of more like getting started. And so as we kind of like look at, especially for this time and energy investment portion of it, I think that there's two ways of looking at that aspect, right? Like it's sort of like I think we all kind of know the benefits of it, but maybe we haven't experienced the benefits of it. But there's also the cost of not doing it. And I will say around that, that where networking leverages all of your other efforts. Like here we are. If you're in this phase of like you see a job posting online, you apply to it, and you wait and wait to hear back whether you got rejected or you're invited for the interview. Yeah, you got invited for the interview, and then you make it to the next interview round, and then you eventually get the offer. Kind of like there's that linear approach of kind of like behind a screen approach of each of these steps. Now, if you apply networking earlier on or throughout this process, it's going to amplify each of these steps in this process. Where, say, you met somebody at a conference and you learn about an opening before it's actually posted, you have some extra time to do research, right? So that's going to amplify this piece of it. Or you've connected with a bunch of people at a conference, you've applied for this job, you looked at your connections, and somebody that you know is connected on LinkedIn to a second dairy connection to that company. You reach out and you have an informational with them. That's going to amplify this part in terms of strengthening your application, strengthening your interviewing opportunities, just with getting an inside scoop, right? And building that champion throughout. And so kind of like those benefits and gains and that potentiality versus like the cost of just like waiting behind things. And I've heard of students that have like applied to numerous positions and just waiting. And I think even more important than ever in this kind of environment is this part of connecting with folks and being present. And so, you know, there's this idea of like, hey, let's connect the dots. Like, here are all these dots on, how to do networking and all this other stuff. And it's like, all rosy and stuff like that. That's networking 101, kind of like how do you get started and doing the outreach and engaging and rolling forward through it. But what I would like to challenge you all to think about is how are you creating those dots or creating those opportunities to connect. And I will also say that, dots are not so nice and neat, right? Like in this world, it's not a linear journey by any means. There's so many twists and turns. And so like those dots might be all over the place, right? There may be a lot of dots everywhere. But then how do you, as you create you may create some and some may emerge, right? But then how do you, as you're creating and as they're emerging, connect them in a way and in a picture that works for you in this season? And so, like, as we think about these different phases of networking around self-reflection and industry and research, outreach and engagement, and follow-up and cultivation, kind of like we've actually held a lot of events before on sort of like this networking 101, um, particularly addressing the outreach and engagement section of it, right? Like the part two. Um, this to not today with like advanced networking, it's really about the self-reflection, the branding, and this is where your professional branding comes into play. What do you know about yourself? What can you tell about yourself to others, in light of um, where you think you want to head next, given your industry research? And then how do you follow up and cultivate those relationships? So I would say, like, because like in terms of the part three, really it's having a strong part one. And so that's what we're kind of going to get more into and take a deeper dive into with today's activities. And so as we enter into, prepare to enter into breakout rooms, just a reminder that it's ideal to have your camera on so that there's a face to the name, and that everybody in the breakout room has a chance to speak and listen to one another. And as always, that we work together in creating inclusive environment. That's a core value here at SPH. And so as we get ready to enter the breakout rooms, like just be prepared to introduce yourself, the degree program, how many semesters or courses you have left to complete your degree, and share out from our career journal, kind of like those activities around, well, what was one of your strengths? And, what's one person that you'll talk with after? Also share kind of like your answer to one of those small talk starter questions, and share a networking challenge and a commitment for next steps, along with which scenario interests you the most, and decide as a group which scenario you want to talk about, and who's going to share that out in the debrief. And while you're in the breakout room, just take note of what others are sharing, just to see if there's something that you hear and you'd be interested in incorporating, or see what other questions are bubbling up and bring them back to the large group. And so let's take a look at a couple of scenarios that you can kind of look at together. So the first one is juggling jitters. Your faculty advisor has selected you to present a poster on your fieldwork at a public health conference. The keynote speaker is an industry professional you highly respect and someone you have been following on LinkedIn. You notice they're in your presentation audience of a small group of just a dozen of people. And so think about what you would do in this situation and afterwards. Like, would you introduce yourself? Why or why not? Like, and what would you say? And what would you do after? And I think as we're reading through these scenarios, you can also adapt them to any situations that you may have encountered recently or something close. Like, maybe you're an alum here, so it's not your faculty advisor. Maybe it's your supervisor and you're going to some conference. Same type of thing, right? But whatever season you're in, think through how you can kind of adapt this to something similar to what you're going through. So that's scenario one, these initial jitters. What about follow-up? So, hey, you did a great job at the conference. You connected on LinkedIn with the keynote speaker, who also gave you their business card and contact details and was like, yeah, let's chat next week. So you've got a date set up for this informal chat. Let's talk through, well, what would you do to prepare? And if there are nerves and butterflies, like how might you address and reframe those? And what can you do even after that conversation? And so now here we get to another scenario, cultivating these connections, right? You had an awesome conversation with that keynote speaker, and you actually learned about a new company that you hadn't heard about before. So after that conversation, you looked on the career page and wow, there's a position opening you're really interested in applying to. And so you also check on LinkedIn and you notice that the keynote speaker's connected to like an HR person in that company. So you're preparing your application materials, your resume, your cover letter for this position. And now you're thinking, well, what can I do with all this information? How can I leverage this contact and these connections to continue supporting these next steps? So what are ideas that you can kind of think of in creating dots to connect them in stepping into this moment? And so as we go into these breakout rooms and look through your career journal, if you need a few extra moments to kind of do that, please take that moment. If you just came, welcome. And we'll give you a good amount of time to pair and share and return back into the room in 20 minutes. And I'll be zooming around the rooms to check in on you. Just to check in, are there any questions from anybody as Caroline is like launching the breakout rooms and you can kind of join? Kind of like looking through your career journals and discussing the scenarios. That's what we'll take some time to do together right now to debrief. And like, as we look through these career journal brainstorm activities, right? Like looking at those qualities about yourself, your strengths, and wanting to identify and self-reflect on that, as well as like garnering the input from people that know you. Another of the activities that we did in our career journal is kind of like these small talk starter questions, like in terms of getting that conversation started. And another activity is kind of like looking at the challenge areas in networking and how we can reframe them and commit to taking steps forward. And so like, as we think about those things in the breakout room scenarios, maybe we can kind of start with the breakout room scenarios, like which room selected the juggling jitters. Anybody want to kind of bring up stuff that was brought up in your discussion on that? And it could be any of the 4 breakout rooms that we had. So we'll hear from one and then I'll follow up.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So I was in a group with Danielle and Araceli, and I think we more so focused on Araceli because she did express that she was very shy. So we just encouraged her to, number one, kind of explore just the mere thought of what she would say to the keynote speaker, and then she just kind of let us know that. Um, she would at least try to ask one question.
Mm.
Then, we kind of encouraged her to just think about what would work to her advantage and how best to follow up to actually speak to them to like move on to step 2. So, yeah, it was
Thank you
more
for
so,
sharing that.
yeah, it was more so on like conquering that fear of
Yeah.
actually speaking to the person.
Yeah, and I love, like, when I was in that breakout room, I loved all the love that was going around in that room to just encourage one another to kind of cast off the fear and to step into the moment, right? And I think one way to cast off the fear is because I feel like sometimes there's a part of it that might be a little bit irrational. So is there a place to be rational about it? For example, in this situation, your faculty advisor already selected you. You've been selected to go to be an ambassador for this important public health topic and to present this this fieldwork at this conference. This must have been important enough for this keynote speaker to come into this room, right? To want to check this out. So that is already a vote of confidence about how important this is and how valuable you are in being a presenter for this. And so I think there's a piece of embracing the confidence that other people may have for you. And, so how do you cast off part of the irrational fear by embracing this confidence and stepping into that moment? And then setting that small goal, right? That once, I love that, Araceli, like just like, what's one thing that you can do? And think about that one thing and doing that one thing. And as you do that one thing, you know, the next time this comes up, what's the second thing that you can do, right? Like, so taking those small steps, taking a step anywhere is the best place to start. And just like riding a bike, it's like, it's going to take a little practice, right? Getting the balance, yeah, getting the footwork, balance, and before you can pick up speed. So thank you all for sharing that. And I think that also comes around to the importance of community and what we're developing here and what is important for every professional to be developing. Scenario 2, anybody, any room talked about the follow-up? Did this one come up in any room? 2 or 3, anybody? Any of these 2?
Well, I can speak to scenario 3.
Great.
Yeah, so our group talked about scenario 3 called connection cultivation. And because I think for all of us, really, this was one of the hardest things for us, was kind of in that process of applying to jobs or being interested in a position, kind of using your network and like reaching out and, you know, leveraging that. I think just generally, I mean, I was saying, and my groupmate was saying that I think for me, asking for help is just hard in general.
Mm,
Like, I'd rather just kind of do it myself and not have to
mm,
rely on or depend on anybody else. Which
mm.
is, you know, not like, it's not a great, not my best trait, but you know, it's harder. So I was saying I would probably like challenge myself to reach out to that person, but also frame it in a way that's like, I want to know your experience working
Mm.
at this organization. Like, how it, like, do you know anyone that's been in this role? Like, do you know what their experience was? Like, just like tell me about that, or like an informational interview, even type thing, rather than
Mm,
kind of straight up asking for like that
mhm,
connection. I
mhm,
think is like maybe it feels a little more tactful and like less about me, more about you and like us.
mm.
Like, so yeah, that was the conversation.
Liz, thank you so much for sharing about that and kind of like hearing about sort of like, all right, again, addressing what is personally challenging for me in stepping into this moment, whether it's like you, I mean, I feel like every strength, there's like sunshine side and a shadow side. So like independence and independent working is a great trait, but not all the time, right? So when it's not at that time, how do we bring out the interdependence? And I think that's another thing about that clinical term networking. Really, it's about teamwork, right? And building your team of networkers, of champions and of advocates. And so like in those moments of like either vulnerability or I'll even say humility, right? Is that actually a chance? Like asking for help could be a chance to develop a relationship. And so, you know, I love how you said like you would challenge yourself to like take that step to ask. And then, you know, even though the explicit goal is like, I really want this job, but to approach it more, what are implicit ways that you can approach this, right? Like, and yeah, it's kind of like the other thing is kind of in this scenario, you've already had a great conversation with this person. This person mentioned this company, right? So it was just a quick email of like, hey, keynote speaker, like, thanks so much for your recommendations. I actually looked at this company and there's this role that I'm really interested in. And I'm preparing my application materials for it. Could we have a chat? Would you be able to like look these over for me? Could we have a chat about this? Like when is the convenient time for you? Right. And kind of like you don't have to ask them about that, their contact then, but like just ask them for that moment if they're free, right? And if they are, then during that time of conversation and you'll get good feedback on your application materials, then you might be able to say it's just like, you know, and maybe it'll come up with from that person themselves, like, oh, hey, Liz, by the way, I know so and so there. Like I can like maybe they'll offer to connect, right? Or another thing is like you wait until that time, just like, you know, I was looking at LinkedIn and doing more research, and I noticed that you're connected to so-and-so. Like, what's your relationship with that person? Is that somebody that you can refer and connect me to? And if they say, they're like, oh yeah, that was like my college roommate and blah, blah, blah. And I see that person all the time, da, 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 da. It's like, sure. And you can also share that to make it easy for them for that next step. You could be like, wow, thanks so much. Like, I'll send you an email that makes it easy for you to forward to them. So you can kind of just say, dear keynote speaker, like, thank you so much for chatting with me about this role at this company. I really appreciate your connecting me to your contact there. I look forward to kind of like learning more about this role in this company as I'm preparing my application materials. Sincerely, like, your name, your LinkedIn, your email, like your full kind of contact info. That way, keynote speaker can easily pop that email over to so-and-so contact, right? And it's all right there. Or they can kind of like link it right there. So you're making it easy for them. So these are kind of these like advanced networking tips to sort of like create those dots to connect them in applying all of those best practices in kind of like outreach and engagement. So I hope that that can kind of be helpful as you kind of think about those next steps for yourselves. But I really think like that self-reflection part and challenging those roadblocks to overcome them is the first step, right? I will say, like, you know, continued follow-up, like, and this follow-up part also goes into like what other people were saying earlier that they find to be the challenge areas in terms of industry research, right, and preparation. And you know, there is those two sides to that. Knowing yourself, like, what are you interested in? What are your skills? Those special talents and abilities that you enjoy applying, and then how do you want to apply them? Like, what are those areas in public health, whether they're topics or organizations or communities or environments, and matching that to what's out there, right? So like one side is knowing yourself and the other side is kind of like exploring out there. And, you know, we've had a bunch of workshops all throughout this year, like one about breaking into the field of public health, landscape mapping, and that sort of a thing. And so like after today, we'll kind of provide those resources again for people that are interested in strengthening their skill sets in that to look at further. But really like that self-reflection piece is a lot of what is discussed in one-on-one career coaching meetings. So I'd encourage you all to kind of schedule time to connect, use that time and invest in yourself for that connection. I know other things that have come up for folks during the breakout room is also kind of like field work and identifying opportunities for field work, preparing your materials, like really strong resume and application materials for that. Please connect with our office. We're here to support you to that. So you show up and ready to do the work, we're ready to meet you there. And so like on Handshake, if you can book those appointments with the Office of Experiential Learning, as well as with for career coaching. And if you're in the Career Skills Academy, you can kind of like look at that career values exercise and NACE assessment exercises and activities. And we have a plethora of resources, tip sheets that cover every single aspect of this on our website, as well as in the Handshake career resource library. Sometimes it could be a little bit of like a scavenger hunt, which is why, like, if you come and talk to us, we will direct you to where to go. And so I hope that, you know, the questions that we've kind of like started to kind of scratch the surface at and have been helpful, and like we can kind of continue to take a deeper dive in those in continued conversations. It would really mean a lot to us if you would take a moment to fill out the survey. Caroline, if you could drop the link to the survey in the chat, that would be great. I'm going to stay on for a few extra minutes for those that do have questions for me. And just so that you know, we are around in all summer long. We work year round. And so we actually have summer events coming up. One is called Networking Your Way into a Job, right? So keep an eye out for the calendar that will be coming out shortly. And like register for our summer events. Like if you're graduating, we have an event for new grads and the job search for new grads. So keep engaged, keep coming, keep the conversation going, and keep riding that bike. And one of our traditions here is like a one-word checkout. Like as you're headed out, if you can just drop in the chat, what's one word that you're feeling as you're leaving the Zoom room after investing the lunch hour with us? That would be great. So thank you all for being here for this last event of the semester, but really not the last conversation. So wishing you a really strong finish to the semester, as well as looking forward to continue working and supporting you throughout your career journey. Thanks, everyone. Any questions? I know that I sped through the last part. I'm sorry, because like when I was zooming around in the breakout rooms, everybody was having such great conversations. I felt really bad about interrupting. So, and I feel like that's one of the most important parts. But yeah, I'm just curious, like, what are some things that are coming up for people? Like, what are challenges that maybe weren't addressed or questions that you want to take a deeper dive into?